Day 2 of the 2019 NHL Draft has produced some pretty significant NHL trades, including Patrick Marleau, PK Subban, and JT Miller. In today's video, we're going to recap all the significant trades and give you my thoughts coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as we recap round 1 of the NHL Draft that went down last night, we certainly were hoping for a lot of trade activity, and it never happened. There was only one minor trade involving some picks during the first round, but the floodgates kind of opened up here today. We finally had some movement, and some pretty significant movement here at that. Things got all underway here when the Toronto Maple Leafs dealt veteran forward Patrick Marleau to the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, of course, it's been reported here numerous times, we've discussed it before, that Patrick Marleau really wants to head west, where his family's from, heading back to California. Obviously, Carolina is not in California, and more than likely, he's going to end up being bought out by the Hurricanes, become a free agent, and then he can sign with hopefully a team in California if it works out for him. I know he'd like to go to San Jose as his first preference, and we'll see if they're able to accommodate, but they certainly have a lot more pressing issues here right now than taking back Marleau, so we'll see what happens on that front. The Carolina Hurricanes have mentioned here that they really would like to convince Marleau to play for the season. They would like to have him in their lineup, but I really don't think that is likely going to happen here. Considering he wanted to go west, I'm really surprised he ended up in Carolina. Obviously, Patrick Marleau would have had to approve this trade as well, since he had a no-move clause, so I'm sure he only approved the trade with the understanding that he would want to be bought out and wouldn't really want to play there. So obviously Carolina gets a pretty decent return here for taking on the Marleau contract. Going with Patrick Marleau to Carolina is the Toronto Maple Leafs first round selection in 2020. Now that is a conditional first round pick, so there is a possibility that that might get bumped. The condition being that it's lottery protected here, and they also receive a 2020 7th round pick here as well. And then of course going the other way to the Maple Leafs is only a 2020 6th round selection. So obviously in this case here, this is really just a salary dump for the Maple Leafs, although the Leafs paid a pretty significant price, giving up a first round pick in order to get that contract here off their books. Obviously, for taking on that contract, the Carolina Hurricanes get some pretty decent compensation here. If they buy Marleau out, they don't get any cap relief, but obviously they can pay a smaller percentage of what's owed to him, which I believe is in the neighborhood of about $3.8 million, and then he can become a free agent, and they move on here. So we already said more than likely that Patrick Marleau would most likely end up in California with one of those teams, or one of the Western teams as close to home as he can get. And more than likely, the Leafs would need a third team with a salary cap space in order to take the contract on here and to facilitate that trade. So obviously, the Carolina Hurricanes thought that receiving the first round pick was worth it, because obviously they have lots of cap space that they can manage that here for the single year. So Patrick Marleau goes to Carolina. They're hopeful he'll play for them. I'm going to say he more than likely does not. Pretty well 99.9% chance. And then he ends up being bought out, become a free agent, and then he heads himself west and see where he ends up. I know, like I said, his first preference is San Jose, but that by no means is a guarantee. They have their own salary cap issues here to deal with as well. Now, staying with the Leafs here momentarily, there have been some other reports indicating that now that they've freed up some salary cap space, they also have some contracts here in the works for forwards Kasperi Kapanen and Andreas Johnsson. Now, those contracts have not officially been announced, but the Kapanen contracts believed to be a 3-year deal, somewhere between 3.2 to 3.4, and the Johnsson contracts believed to be somewhere around 4 years and around $3.25 to $3.5 million per year. So, pretty reasonable deals based on how they performed this past season. So we'll see when those deals get officially announced, but essentially they're taking the Patrick Marleau money and signing those two young RFAs. So obviously that's a pretty good day overall for Kyle Dubas. However, Kyle Dubas still has a lot of work to do between the Marner contract, trying to trade Zaitsev, and filling out the rest of the roster here. So there's still plenty of work to be done. There's been rumored that the Leafs have been having a lot of conversations about acquiring a defenseman as well, but yet that's yet to happen. So I guess we'll stay tuned. I do expect plenty more news here on the Leafs over the next little while here while they address those other needs. Not long after the Marleau trade, we saw a very significant trade happen between the Nashville Predators and the New Jersey Devils, with the Nashville Predators sending PK Subban and his $9 million contract with 3 years left on it over to New Jersey. Now, we've talked about it here numerous times before, how PK Subban was one of the players that was most likely to be traded. I didn't really see New Jersey as being a prime candidate, but it does make a lot of sense for them, considering the fact that they could use a veteran defenseman like him. They have all kinds of cap space, so they can absorb that cap hit. And they really, in my opinion here, was able to get him for a pretty good price. Going back to the Nashville Predators, they get defenseman Steven Santini. They get a forward in Jeremy Davies, who was a college hockey player who's recently been signed. More likely starts here in the American Hockey League. They get a 2019 second-round pick, which they then use to select forward Bobby Brink, who's a pretty solid prospect. So that's pretty good for Nashville. And then they also get a second-round pick in next year's draft. But overall, considering the type of player that PK Subban is, I think that's a pretty good price. Really, I think New Jersey got themselves a pretty solid deal. But the reason they did is that Nashville did not retain any salary here on this contract. They freed up $9 million in salary cap space, so that was a big-time salary dump for the Predators. Because of that, the Devils didn't have to give up nearly as much as you might think. They took advantage of the Predators being in a tight cap situation and got themselves a good deal for 3 years here on a pretty solid defenseman. So overall, I like this deal for New Jersey. Obviously, they already drafted Jack Hughes, #1 overall. They just added PK Subban. And of course, that's going to be some welcome news for Taylor Hall, who's looking to possibly sign an extension, but wanted to wait here to see how some of their offseason moves played out. Now, the third and final significant trade here of the day involved the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Vancouver Canucks. The cash-strapped Tampa Bay Lightning, who are up against the cap situation here as well, have traded forward JT Miller over to the Vancouver Canucks. In return, the Tampa Bay Lightning receive a goaltender, Marek Mazanec, who right now is unsigned, so they have the signing rights to this goaltender. He certainly doesn't appear to be an NHL caliber goalie, at least in my opinion, right now. More likely with Tampa, with Vasilevsky and Domingue, he could possibly play for their American Hockey League team. Of course, Tampa is a little bit short on goaltending depth right now after trading Connor Ingram not too long ago, so they really don't have much right now for their farm system, so it makes sense that they would maybe try to acquire a goalie in this type of trade. And they also get 2 draft picks with this as well, including the 2020 first-round selection for the Vancouver Canucks. Now, of course, this is also a conditional pick. If the Canucks don't make the playoffs, then they can bump that out an extra year, and it becomes a 2021 first-round pick. And of course, they also gave up a third-round selection here in the 2019 NHL Draft. Now, I'm not sure I like this trade for the Canucks. I like JT Miller. He's a very versatile forward. He can play all 3 forward positions. He can play up and down your lineup. There's been times when he's played on the top line, like in Tampa. There was a stretch of time there when he played with Stamkos and Kucherov. We've seen him play fairly high in a top 6 role with the Rangers before as well. But there's also been times where he's been more like a third-line player, 40, 50-point type of guy. So I do like the fact of all the versatility he brings. He could certainly possibly fit in with the top 6 with Vancouver, maybe be a third liner, but there's absolutely no guarantee, I don't think, that he's going to be a first or second line player. That's for sure 100% here. And they gave up a first round selection, and it also puts the pressure on them to be good and make the playoffs to make sure that pick isn't overly high. So personally, as much as I like Miller and I think he'd be a decent fit with the Canucks, I just think the price tag here might have been a little bit too high for Vancouver. Like I said, it just really puts the pressure on. I know that the ownership is already putting pressure on the team to get better and get into the playoffs, and that's their goal. But if they fall a little bit short here, they very well might end up giving the Tampa Bay Lightning a fairly high draft pick. So I guess we will see. At least they have the option to bump it out an extra year. That condition on that pick very well might come in handy. So that summarizes all the trades we saw today at the NHL Draft when they completed rounds 2 through 7. I don't think we're anywhere near complete on the trades here. There's been all kinds of chatter still. We also finally got confirmation that the salary cap for next year is confirmed at $81.5 million, which is $1.5 million less than we were led to believe here for a big chunk of the year when we were told it was more likely going to be around 83. That is going to put a lot of teams in even more serious cap trouble than they already are. And for some of these teams up against it in a bad way, $500K or $1 million can really make a huge difference and really might involve them having to shed another player off their roster. So I guess we will see. There's lots of teams like Vegas that are likely going to have to make a trade to get the Leafs aren't done. There's plenty of other action going around the league for teams that are pretty much forced to make trades. So as we now head into the free agent window where teams can start interviewing players as of tomorrow, I can imagine once some of these contracts start getting lined up that we're going to see a fair bit more trade activity. And of course, like I said, free agent frenzy isn't far away as well. So stay tuned to Top Shelf Hockey. I will keep you all up to date with all the breaking news. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.